When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. Now, I'm joined today by Shola Kaye. Shola, hi.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you.
Now, the first time I had the pleasure of being in your audience, Shola, was a few weeks ago. And I train presentation skills. Present with Impact's one of my favorite programs because you can make a huge difference in one coaching session on how to present. And one of the things I share and I focus on is start great. Hook your audience right at the start. And one of the best ever examples I've seen was how you hooked us a few weeks ago. You were doing a talk on empathy and leadership, and you started with a song. So it was a boom hook where you chose to sing Lean On Me, which is actually happens to be a song that is particularly poignant for me. I've used it in sports coaching as a theme for the team. So it had particular resonance, but you have an amazing singing voice. So it also had the wow factor. And it was in that moment, I thought, I need to know Shola better. I need to work with Shola more. And yeah, you're just inspiring by how you are, not just who you are. So it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. One of the things I'm going to ask you straight away, and it's a key theme all the way through this discussion, is talent and talent development. And one of the things that makes you extraordinary is success in multiple careers. So you've been a successful IT consultant. You've been an investment banker. You've been a professional singer for many years. And now you're a world-renowned, award-winning conference speaker. So I'm going to say that's at least 4 careers. You've got 2 successful books, makes you 5 because there's an author, and I could go on. Now, here's the big question, Shola, and I'm really fascinated to hear this answer. How did you realize the talent that you clearly have to do some great things? Because those are 4 careers, but you're pretty good at all of them, if not amazing at all of them. So what did you do to unlock your own talent first? And we'll talk about your brilliant inspirational speaking and your consultancy on empathy and leadership. But how did you first of all unlock Shola Kaye as someone who can really bring value to other people?
Oh, well, thanks for that introduction. I'm thinking, who's Shola? Where is she?
That's me.
But to be honest, it never felt like I was trying to go on this journey to kind of get to the bottom of things and unlock whatever it was that's going to jump out of Pandora's box, right? It was more that along the way, when I was faced with the decision as to do I stay in this or do I go take a step in a different direction, I think one of the values that I have is growth, and just that we're here to explore whatever opportunities face us, and that we can that seem like a good chance to go and learn more and do more. So I think the reason why I've kind of explored lots of different areas and things hasn't been because I've thought, right, I've conquered that, put the flag up, it's time to move on. It's more been that I've just seen, okay, I've done this for a while. I feel like I've enjoyed it, or I've given what I can to it. And there's this other area now that I can go towards, and not so much to conquer a new thing, but what can I put on top of what I've already learned to make it what I've got from that even richer, and sort of more multi-layered, such that I can help people even more. So it's really been just not being afraid to go in a new direction and just see what's there. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's really been the motivator, I guess.
I'm going to dig deeper here, Shola, because
Oh.
introvert, female, Black, makes that journey of just go for it, seize the opportunity, frankly, much harder than it would have been for me as I grew up, white male, pretty privileged, a lot of things handed to me, and quite the reverse in your case, because you've also done that several elements of your career multinationally. So that's incredibly brave to live in different countries and to try different things. So how did you overcome that introversion, which says you don't put yourself out there? You don't say, hey, look at me. How did you do that?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting in a way because my parents are Nigerian, and Nigerian parents are kind of renowned for wanting their kids to be, doctor, lawyer, accountant, whatever it is. And as a kid, I'd always wanted to be a singer, and I didn't even dare to tell my parents I wanted to be a singer. And I remember wanting to kind of break free a little bit from the constraints that they had. And so you talk about multinational, and I decided I wanted to go and work in the States. And literally, I decided I'd go, and it was kind of thing where you just tell
How
them at the
old were
last.
you then, Shola? How old were you when you said, you know
Oh,
what, singer, America?
I think I was 23.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's pretty
uh,
young.
yeah, quite young. And my very first job after I left uni was as a teacher. So I was a teacher in a secondary school in Putney. And some of the kids there, I mean, Putney's quite a sort of salubrious area of
Yeah,
London,
no,
but
Putney. Yeah.
some, but it was a secondary comprehensive school. Some of the kids were quite, rough and ready, shall we say. And I remember that I was talking to one girl in class and she said, "Miss, your voice is like a rat squeaking in my ear." I was about, I was
Thanks a
about
lot.
20, yeah, I was like 22. And I was like, right, that's it. I'm done. So I started applying to sort of programs to go off to the States. And I just thought, well, look, there's another world out there. I'm here at the moment feeling like I'm kind of under the shadow of my parents. I was a teacher because they wanted me to be a teacher. They thought it was a safe career for me. And I thought, well, no, let's try something different. So in a way, like the beginning of my international career was really moving away from rather than towards. But you know what? Whatever creates the movement is it can be a good thing, right? Movement. We don't want to stand still. I was young, so that's what got me into the States, and I just studied there for a while, and then I started working. So I worked for a consulting company, and again, I think maybe part of my life is categorized by things not quite working as I'd anticipated, but instead of staying with that and saying, "Oh well, this is where I am now." Okay, if it's not working, there's something else. There's always something else. So so I was working consulting as an introvert. In those days, the Susan
Yeah.
Cain's book hadn't come out yet, Quiet, which I think for many introverts was like a real watershed moment. And that book hadn't come out yet. And so I was among loads of extroverts because Americans typically are very confident and they speak up.
Expressive.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So I remember being in this workplace, this little kind of timid um, British girl who was quite young and hadn't seen a lot and didn't really know what she was talking about because it was her first corporate job. And just feeling not very good about myself and my skills. And what was, again, another watershed moment for me was when the company I was at, instead of saying to me, "Oh, well, what can we do to bring you forward?" They actually just summoned me to the managing director and I was put on probation.
You're not
So,
doing very well. You're
no,
nearly gone.
yeah,
Final warning. Yeah, cheers. No
exactly.
feedback before that, probably.
Yeah, none
Yeah,
whatsoever. None
yeah.
whatsoever.
Out of the blue.
And, I completely internalized this and thought, okay, well, it's me. It didn't even occur to me that they could have done more. But anyway, with the help of a colleague, who I presume was put up to it by the company, because otherwise how would she have known I needed support? But anyway, she came and just sort of would sit with me early before the working day, just for half an hour here and there. And I don't even know what she did, but just the fact that somebody was paying attention and watching over my shoulder when I was learning to code, which I've never done any coding before, stuff like that, just gave me what I needed to develop a bit more confidence and end up staying in the role a lot longer, and everything turned out okay. And I think that was for me where I started thinking about empathy, support, what people need to flourish. And it wasn't until years later I started speaking about empathy, but that was kind of the seeds starting to germinate a little bit for me. So yeah, so I mean, I think sometimes when you look at people's career from the outside, it looks like they've kind of, leapt from one kind of golden step to the next.
Deliberately,
Yeah, exactly.
preordained, planned out.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really more about, obviously it's not always like that, but then how do you bring things together at the end, or how do you make sense of the different steps on your journey? And so I've been able to kind of integrate all those different things I've done, if you like, and bring them into what I do now. So it's nothing has gone to waste, if you like.
Yeah, there's a lovely element of how you communicate one-to-one and one-to-many, of being very self-effacing, very natural and authentic, and yet, and I'm going to come back on this point, you have the ability to stand in front of big audiences and wow them with your intellect and or with your voice. And I've seen both sides of that. How did you do that to the point where you've got a stunning voice, but then you need to have the presence and confidence to stand, in our case, without musical background and sing? How did you make that step when you moved into professional singer?
Yeah. Well, I'd always loved music. And again, going back to my Nigerian parents, they would never have countenanced having a child who was a singer. Like, singer? What are you doing?
It's not a real
Crazy.
job, is it? It's not a real job.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't. So then when I'd sort of I had a couple of corporate jobs, I was now back in the UK. And I had felt like, because the corporate world didn't seem like it was very warm, very empathetic, very supportive of difference, or of taking time to kind of find your feet, I just remember thinking, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to do the thing that I've always wanted to do, which is be a singer. And by this stage, I was probably, early 30s or something. And I'd been taking singing lessons just for fun. I was working as a supply teacher just while I could take the singing lessons and kind of develop myself. And then I reached the stage where I thought I was kind of just about good enough to kind of get an act together. And so then I developed an act as a Motown singer. And I was doing that for a number of years, just sort of traveling up and down the country in my Nissan Micra little car. I remember one weekend I think it was a bank holiday weekend, and I had a gig in Northumberland. Then I got one on the Saturday, one in Kent on the Sunday, and then one in somewhere like Yorkshire on the Monday. So my little car was going up and down.
Well planned. Yep.
Yeah, really, really. But I think a lot of the nerve that I have, if you like, now for public speaking comes from being okay with singing, because I feel like there's a lot more that can go wrong when you're singing than when you're speaking. People are expecting a certain melody, they're expecting your voice to be a certain quality, they're expecting you to entertain them. And so there'd be multiple opportunities to kind of develop a thicker skin, if you like, from singing. Because there was one time, for example, my PA that I had, I don't know what was wrong with it, but there was some kind of electrical fault. And so every now and again I'd be singing and it would just go dead. So
your lips are moving, but I can't hear you at the back of the auditorium.
Yeah, exactly. The music would shut out for a couple of seconds. So you can imagine how afraid you are. You're singing in front of 100 people. Oh my God, is it going to go? Is it going to go? Is it going to go? So, and every now and again it did. And eventually I got it fixed, of course. But things like that happening, or the drunken person that comes up near your PA and keeps spilling beer over your speaker and you're worried it's going to blow up, all those sorts of things are going on in that kind of party scene, which are not happening in a speaking auditorium. Everyone's very well behaved, and so I think that has kind of helped me develop that kind of thicker skin, if you like, and greater tolerance for the things that can happen when you're speaking.
And I read about the five performances that shaped you. And we're talking about the great Aretha Franklin. We're talking about Jenny Holiday, Bowie, Bruce Springsteen. Just tell me a bit more about from a musical sense, what that did for you, why it inspired you to go initially Motown, but you sing in many different genres. What was the inspiration?
Sorry, the inspiration for choosing those songs, or just for me
Yeah,
doing
those songs, but also to which avenue of music to sing about, which genre.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, when it's funny that you unearthed that article, because that's from ages ago. But well done, you. Impressive.
Yes.
But yes, songs like Born to Run, for example, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I like artists who are quite visceral, and they really, they're creative. They really put a lot of themselves into what they're doing. And Aretha Franklin, there was a great, I think she did a performance where she was singing for Obama. And I mean, she must have been probably 70 at the time. And she starts with this big coat, and she's playing with this coat on. And then all of a sudden she just throws the coat off, stands up from the piano, and just walks onto the front of the stage. And just little things like that, just that showmanship, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So it's, I feel like there's so much that we can take from musical artists and bring to the speaking stage. And the first book I wrote, which was called How to Be a Diva at Public Speaking, Diva is a framework for being dynamic, inspiring, valuable, and authentic. And part of the reason I wrote the book was because every time I would explain to people that I was a professional singer, people would say, "Oh, I'm a singer, great." But I felt like a lot of the opportunities one gets from being on stage singing are very similar to what we get from being a public speaker or presenting at work or whatever, and that people don't appreciate how much leeway and fun and creativity and how much of yourself you can pour into your presentation skills if you take the time to develop them properly. So that was kind of my motivation, really. And again, like what have I learned, and how can I bring that to people in a way that makes what they're doing day to day more palatable and makes them better at it? So the reason I chose Motown, I was doing Motown and jazz. And Motown, I love the male Motown artists. I love Stevie Wonder, the Four Tops. I found some of the music like the Supremes. I love Diana Ross, but I found some of the female songs were a bit more kind of closed in. I felt like the men had a chance to express themselves a lot more. So I would love singing the male songs, but I do the women's ones as well, of course. And then also doing jazz. I mean, jazz is all about how you interpret the song. So that I found great for self-expression and just playing around with who I was creatively.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And one of the things I love about doing the podcast, and I do a bit of research, read your books, because you've written 2 books. Is that right? The other one is Small Talk, Big Talk. Is that right?
That's correct, Mark. Yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that one. Is it more about general communication?
Yeah, that's right. So the Diva one I self-published, and then a couple of years later, I was approached by a publisher in the States to do this one, and it's all about big talk, small talk. So it's about big conversations, big meaningful, difficult conversations, and also just things like how do you approach someone at a networking meeting, or you're talking to a stranger on a train, just little. So really the gamut really of kind of conversations that we might have in our lives. So yeah, I kind of see that book as being not introductory, but it's probably more for maybe a younger person who is just getting into the world, maybe the world of work, and just having that introduction into how to communicate better.
Yeah, it's great. And one of the things I do in the research is I ask ChatGPT, this is fascinating, whoever I'm going to speak to. So I put it to ChatGPT, tell me the 3 most outstanding things about Shola Kaye. And so I'm going to read them out to you and get your response, because this is what's on the internet in terms of who you are, right? In terms of what are the 3 things that make Shola Kaye particularly special. And it's in this order. You have a career arc with real breadth, and it talks about 4 careers. You've talked to us about teaching as well. Second, you productize empathy as a leadership discipline, not just as a theory, and we need to explore that more. And she performs what she preaches. So you live what you preach. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable, actually.
It's not bad, is it? It's not bad. I think ChatGPT tends to err on the positive, so we'll take that. But I
Okay.
love this point about productize, because it's in the speech I heard you make a couple of weeks ago. It was very much about that empathy is something that is talked about a lot. It's front of mind in life, but especially in businesses now. You know, we need to bring empathy as a leader and in terms of a culture. But that's easy to talk about. And how do you apply it? And I love this word used by ChatGPT. You productized it. You've made it something that here are the steps to follow in order to do. Bring that to life for us. What would you recommend for an organization that says we need to be more empathetic internally and show more connectivity to our customers? What's the product that you advertise and sell?
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I think so many people still associate empathy with just, being nice, smiley, kind, um, understanding people, asking a few questions, but then that's really it. And because I like to have a very sort of step by step framework approach, because that's the way my mind works, because I studied chemistry years ago and it's all about, here's your recipe, follow this step by step. That's what I feel I need to bring to people. So I like to talk about practical empathy and also the empathy gap. And I guess when we're talking about organizations, you've got the day-to-day interactions with people, with your managers, with your colleagues, but you've also got what is the organization actually doing, whether it's for clients or for their employees, that those individuals or those entities think of as being empathetic. They're interacting with an empathetic organization. These are the things that they're doing. So, for example, Business Solver, they release a lot of data about the state of empathy, and a lot of employees feel that empathy is their employer recognizing, for example, the important moments in their career.
Yeah,
So
huge.
yeah, like maybe your 1 year anniversary or just the things that happen as people go through their careers. Are they being recognized and called out? It also is recognizing that people have families at home. So it's not just the employee you see there, but there might be a whole raft of things happening at home. So is that being noticed as well? And then you've got things like flexibility in the workplace. So, do you have flexible working or some leeway in terms of how you work? So there's all those sorts of things. But then there's also the individual interacting with their manager and what sort of interactions are they having day to day. So is that manager somebody who is listening or are they telling them always what to do? Another thing I talk about is big talk and small talk in the context of if you want to develop an empathetic relationship with your colleague or your report, you've got to be able to find a way to go from the small talk, the "How are you doing? What's it?" to
Yes,
having those, deeper level conversations.
so
How are you going to
poignant.
understand? Exactly. How will you understand somebody if everything's always surface level? So, how do you turn a small talk conversation to a big talk conversation? It could be with, instead of saying, "How are you?" they might say, "How are you feeling about the latest change to bloody blah," or "How are you feeling about the projects, this part of the project?" But just taking it from the very bland to the specific and waiting for a response, not sort of batting people off when they've said the first thing, but just staying with it and going deeper. So even those sorts of things and people understanding that that leader really truly wants to know what they're feeling, not to negate it or not to say, "Oh yeah, but you need to," but to actually be with that and to recognize that in that person. Those sorts of things really help lay a groundwork for empathy throughout the organization.
What I love about this is it's reminding me of what you said on stage. And classically, as a human being, I heard it once. I followed up and read a couple of your articles, but you talking about it again is triggering. And I think, yeah. I remember one of the conclusions I took when I listened to you. And it's my own language of what you were saying around superficial conversation. And then my language is you have a second level conversation. You go deeper. And most managers, through my experience, both in terms of my own experience, but also working with organizations and seeing it multiple times, is that second level conversation isn't happening. It's all about the task at hand, and it's all relatively superficial. How are you? Yeah, good. Oh, great. By the way, have you done that paper for me? Okay, send it in by Friday. So superficial, task orientated, and not that deeper level of how do you feel about the role you're in at the moment, or whatever that better, deeper question is.
Mm.
How do you help, Shola? Because I'm sure people will be listening to this thinking I could do with Shola's help. How would you help an organization that, first of all, needs to have an awareness of the gaps? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's typically for them to have an awareness of to them to call me in, they would need to be aware to some extent that those things need changing. And sometimes it's easier for them to call somebody in to help with communication, for example.
Mhm.
So it might be feedback, or we need to improve people's feedback conversations. So then once you get in and talk about feedback, you can start to unpack, well, why isn't the feedback landing? Or is the feedback two-way? Do people truly feel that they can actually influence the way that their leader is behaving, or is it all just one way? And so then you can start to say, well, what's happening in terms of empathy? What's happening in terms of understanding? And then you can help to kind of push things a little bit further out from there. So that's one way. And then other ways, for example, I worked with one organization and they were kind of talking about feedback, but they were saying they wanted to call it emotionally intelligent feedback conversations. So then we were able to run through all the different areas of emotional intelligence and apply learnings or frameworks from each of those to the quality of the feedback conversations that were being had. So we looked at, how do you apply empathy? How do you apply motivation? How do you understand your team's motivation? Do you understand their values? Do you understand the motivators that they have day to day? And so then just by looking at those interactions with that level of detail, obviously there's a lot that comes up, further training that people might need, etc. But those are some different ways to get the foot in the door and then expand from there.
I like that. And just listening to you, I see a real rigor in terms of here's the thinking and here's how it applies and becomes applicable, which I love. If I was to recommend to every organization one program that would help everybody, it would be called Presenting with Impact, because most people don't do what you recommended earlier with there's so much leeway, use it, personalize it, be authentic. 99% of the presentations I see in business are absolutely PowerPoint driven, and the person isn't even looking at the audience, they're reading words off a slide. That's 99%. The absolute go-to is PowerPoint, which is catastrophic in terms of impact your audience. So if I could, every employee present with impact without fail. What program relevant to empathy would you recommend as, do you know what? Every single organization should have a development program that does this. Describe that must-have development program.
Mm, good question. What I'll do, maybe I haven't thought in depth about what that particular, because I think also all organizations are slightly different, but
And they're at a
um,
different stage, aren't they? Some are only just becoming aware of it, and others are more than aware of it and want a solution. So I get that.
exactly. Yeah. So, if I were going in to do a keynote on empathy, for example, I tend to break it down into three. I call it the 3 C's or the 4 C's, if you like. And the first C that I talk about is curiosity, because I feel as if you're not curious about other people, how will you even ask the questions to be empathetic in the first place? So we talk about curiosity, we talk about listening, developing your listening skills, and just not making assumptions. Because again, if I go back to my career all those years ago, I'm sure that my young manager I had in that first role had made assumptions about me. And so instead of thinking, well, she's an introvert, she needs support, the assumptions were either, well, Shola's either lazy or she's incapable. And so then that's what got me frog marched to the MD for being probation, right?
Shock. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I would start. Curiosity, not making assumptions. Then the second C that I talk about is courage. And sometimes it takes courage to have those empathetic conversations that we talked about. It takes courage to go beyond the superficial, how are you, to what's really going on with you right now. Because you might hear something from the person that jolts you out of the stupor you might be in, or people are deep. They're dealing with complex things, and if you're truly wanting to know what's going on for somebody, you've got to have the courage to go where they are to some extent, right? So, so courage is the second part. Then the third C is being a catalyst. So being somebody that makes things happen. Because what are you going to do with that information you've got from being curious and courageous? If you're just going to sit on it and do nothing, then it's like you've been empathetic, but then you've not been compassionate. And compassionate is about taking the empathy and then helping somebody or doing something. So being a catalyst is the action part for me of empathy. And I talk about, for example, a coach that I had many years ago who he knew that in my first couple of roles, I didn't speak up a lot and I was pretty quiet and things. But then I'd said to him, well, look, I really want to be a keynote speaker. And instead of him saying, well, oh, look, love, I've heard your background. Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah.
Instead of saying that, he just said, right, okay, get a diary, bring a calendar, let's make a plan of action. So he was a massive catalyst for me. He didn't do the work, but he sort of gave me that little spark of energy that implied that, yes, you can. Shola, why can't you? There are other people doing it. Why not you? So are we being catalysts for the people in our day-to-day lives, right? Because empathy is not only understanding where somebody is, but maybe understanding what they're trying to achieve and trying to help them on that journey. So it's kind of a bit more active than just, oh, there, dear, this is tough. But it's like, let me take a few steps with you to get you on the way. So that's the third C, and then the fourth C is kind of similar things. That's compassion. Sometimes people need it spelled out for them, and other times they kind of get that all those three combined can make compassionate behavior in the workplace. So I kind of start with
compassion,
those.
the foundation.
Yeah,
the foundation of the other three.
yeah. I see it as. I mean, I think they all work hand in hand, really. And so when I do that keynote in workplaces, I typically will say to people, well, which of those three C's do you most need to connect with right now? That's where you should begin. And some people, they just need to be more curious. Others have gone in a little bit too self-confined, and so they need to step out and be more courageous. But I think then on an individual level, and then even if someone's a leader, then they can see what they can achieve, at a sort of slightly wider level across the org. And so then that's kind of a good place to begin. And then, we can do more from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. And one of the things I love about great leaders like yourself is they've got absolute clarity of a higher purpose, a vision, and you have, which is encouraging, as I understand it, it's encouraging happier, more engaged workplaces where you're encouraging teams and individuals to speak up with more confidence, impact, and influence. That's your higher drive for doing what you do. Where did that come from? Where did that decision that says, you know what, I can help other people be brave like you were when you said, I'm going to the States at 23 and I'm going to sing for a career and things like that. How can you do that? Where did that come from? The drive to help others, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I think there's only so much that one can do for themselves, right? So, I feel like I've had an exciting career. It's not over yet. There's still other things going on. But then, of course, you get so much from helping other people. And if I can take the lessons that I've learned and then use them with the voice that I've managed to build, which is amplified through speaking on stages or singing on stages, then it would be a real waste for me to have those abilities and not use them to help people to do more. And then also, because I see people who perhaps were or are like me, in that maybe they're more introverted or they're waiting for their turn to come up, and it maybe doesn't come unless they kind of hustle bustle a little bit. So for me, it's also about giving back to those sorts of people who are just maybe otherwise wouldn't get as much of a look in as they deserve to have. So it's really, quite broad. It's like those individuals, and whether that could be either people who are perhaps neurotypical or from a minority, or as I say, just introverts or quieter types. But I think there's so many. The world needs people to step up and stand up and do more and move things in the right direction. So we need to galvanize as many people as we can. And if I can do my small little bit to galvanize a few others, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I wrote to I was asked by my publisher, so like you did, I got a publisher, Brenda Dempsey, brilliant. She said, you need to speak right at the start. The first thing you say, it's almost like I'd like to thank my wife, without whom. You've got to say something profound. And I said, well, there's only one thing that I really believe in that I need to talk about. She said, what's that? And I said, this book is for those who make themselves heard when the world isn't ready to listen. And it's right in your space about speak up, helping people have the confidence to speak up when something needs to be spoken about, that everyone's voice matters. And no matter what the self-talk is, that imposter syndrome saying, oh, no, I don't think I'm worthy, right? Let's overcome that, because you're more than worthy and your voice matters. And that's so easy to say. You and I are people who do this for a living, coach people, mentor people, hopefully inspire people. So easy to say that when between us we've overcome any self-doubts or nervousness or introversion to go, ta-da, my voice matters. What do you think the secret is to unlock that? And I'm not going to use introversion because that's actually a way a brain works. I'm thinking more about lack of self-confidence. I don't think I can. What tips do you have for anyone listening that's a little bit in that space? I want to, but I don't feel that I can.
Yeah, excellent question. And thank you for asking that one. And it kind of takes me on to I've got another book that's coming out soon. And it's called Emotional Audacity.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
it's really how emotional intelligence and courage come together to make something happen. And I kind of wrote it to help individuals whose hearts are in the right place, but they feel, okay, well, I should have spoken up in that meeting, but I kept quiet, or I should have done that thing, but I didn't. And what it kind of does is breaks down that decision that you have to make in that split second into 3 areas. So there's looking at yourself and how prepared you are to take action in that moment, whether it's something that is violating your values, so you have to speak up, or maybe you feel like you're not regulated, so you want to say something but you're worried it won't come out the way you want it to. So there's yourself, then there's also the others that are involved, so the relationship you have with them, or how empathetic you are. Have you looked at it from their angle first? And then finally there's the environment as well. So you might be thinking, well, I want to say something, but it's too risky, or there's no safety here for me to do this thing. So basically what it does is it just models these 3 areas that you can just quickly look at and then think, okay, well, maybe I'm not feeling confident, but instead of speaking now, maybe if I speak to my manager one-to-one, so change the time or change the place, or, okay, it's risky to talk to this person, but I can talk to that other person, it's less risky. Or, okay, I have a great relationship with this person, so I think it's all right to say something. So instead of it just being I'm confident or I'm not confident, you start to have a lot of different factors and things you can play with and levers that you can pull and push that then make you think, okay, I can just tweak the environment slightly and then I can go ahead and do this. So then people feel a bit more empowered because it's not all about you. It's all about, the leverage that you have in the situation that you're in. So hopefully that doesn't sound too complicated. It's actually quite straightforward. But yeah, just empowering people to act and make decisions when perhaps they wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, and it comes back to the 4 C's you mentioned earlier about stay compassionate to yourself, recognize the nervousness and the, oh, can I, can't I, but bring courage. It's a kind of a go for it call that says find a way to put one step forward, whether that's a meeting with someone you don't usually have a meeting with, or you ask a challenging question rather than say nothing, which is the temptation, isn't it? Is to think it and not say it. I love that. And so do you do that in one-to-one coaching as well, where you're mentoring that journey?
I have haven't more recently, and it's always an interesting one because I used to do a fair bit of one-to-one coaching when I was mainly doing presentation skills, and then I stopped just because I think maybe as an introverts tend to be obsessed with energy conservation. So it's
Exactly.
always felt much more felt much more efficient to go and speak to 1,000 people for 1 hour than to speak to one person for 1 hour. So I kind of stopped doing the one-to-one coaching, but it's something I'm entertaining at the moment to get back into a little bit, or groups at least.
It's also the scientist in you in terms of efficiency, isn't it? 1-to-1 or 1-to-150. Okay, I'm going to do the 150 because that's much more efficient. That's the chemist in you, I think.
Yeah,
making that
completely.
decision. Now, there's an energy about you that's pretty cool, Shola, and you're doing such lovely things, lovely speeches, amazing books that you write, and inspiring people. You clearly are, because you certainly did that for me when I heard you singing and speaking. It was like, wow. What's the big next? Because frankly, you're carrying on. You're great at speaking. You're writing books, so that continues. But what's the big next thing for you? Because you are that sort of person that can decide, right, something totally different. Do you have any thoughts about what could be big next?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'd obviously want to carry on with what I'm doing, but I'd almost like to somehow bring more music into what I'm doing, whether it's being aligned with an organization that has events going on. And so then there's someone like me that comes and they do maybe 3 or 4 songs, or 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end, and then a bit of rah-rah speaking in the middle. Because I feel like there's a gap right now. I think there hasn't been, sort of a few years ago, I did a talk in the Philippines, and it was a big corporate talk, and I did my keynote and there were other speakers. And then they had a company choir that came out. And it's a huge organization. They've got different business units, and each business unit's got a choir. So this choir came out and they sang 3 or 4 songs. And I was in tears because it was so moving. It was so touching. And it was fantastic to have that alongside the corporate stuff, because you remember then I'm a human, right? I'm not just a cog in the wheel. I've got a heart that's beating, and I'm touched and moved by things. And I kind of feel like, I know that there are odd people doing bits of singing and stuff in corporate environments in the UK, but I feel like there's more that can be done, and I want to get involved in that, just to be creative and to bring things forward in some way. So I don't know what the next step is. Anyone listening, just feel free to tap me on the shoulder. Help me
Yeah,
out.
do you know, I love the idea, Shola. I really do. Lots of reasons. I'm going to come back to what you said at the start there about a bit of both. I think it has real distance on it. The idea of you sing and then you called it a bit of rah-rah. I think it's huge that, right? You earn the right to be listened to by having an incredible voice, which is exactly what you did with us the other week. It's like, oh my God, right? So, and what it does is it takes you to a different place. A great singer, a great performance means all the woes, all the heartache, all the overthinking stuff that we do constantly with the buzz of our phone, distraction, gone, right? Because I'm having an experience led by someone who can seriously sing, right? So bingo, I feel relaxed, I'm enjoying it, I'm taken to a different place, hopefully a better place. And then you've got your audience, and then you go, right, I'd like to talk to you about empathy. And it's a, I don't know, 10-minute slot where you introduce the concepts of the 4 C's, and you say, here's a practical tool that you can use to apply it for yourself and your teams. Now here's another song. So it's both. I'm getting the amazing experience, and I'm getting tutelage, inspiration, a model to use, that little bit of science of this is what you should use. I think that'd be magical.
Mm,
You also said
good.
something very interesting when we met, because I said, wowzers, that it was amazing you started with Lean on Me. And you said, I hardly ever do that when I'm talking to an English audience. I would in the States, but to the English audience, I mainly just speak. And I remember, I think I was with a couple of colleagues when we were talking with you, we go, no, keep doing that, because it's a hook of incredible power. And then you've got your audience in the palm of your hand, and then you can do whatever you like, right? So that would be my suggestion, is go for that balance of musical entertainment and inspiration, mixed with thought-provoking speech. Be pretty unique, wouldn't it? Be pretty
Thank
unique.
you.
I mean, I've never heard of that. I've gone to some concerts where the artist is also profound. So that they go between songs and they say something about the current political situation that nails it, or about world peace, or whatever it is, and because their voice is heard, it matters what they then say, and so you get a little bit of that. But I don't think there's a dynamic that you've just described that I've ever come across. So that'd be really cool, really cool. Now, as we come to the conclusion, I have to ask the top tips question, Shola. If there's someone listening to this who thinks, I'm going to do something different, right? Your career is a lovely example of that. What ChatGPT calls your broad arc. It's a broad arc. IT consultant, investment banker, singer, author, broad arc teacher, broad arc. A top tip for anyone who is in that, do you know what? My job at the moment isn't really lighting my fire. I should do something fundamentally different, because you've done that at least 4 times. What are your top tips to be courageous enough to try something totally different?
I think first of all, I know we always say that there's only one life to live, right? But if I've always felt that if there's something tugging at you to take you in a different direction, that's you've got to listen, right? You've got to listen. I think you might need to hear that voice or have that call a few times to know that it's genuine and it's not just the call of the day type thing. But I feel as though so many of us are here to grow, to learn, to do more, to be more. Sometimes you don't need to see what the exact where you're going. Sometimes it's just the next step. Getting emotional now. I need to blow my nose.
Good for you.
but sometimes it's just, you don't necessarily need to know exactly where you're going next. But I think if there's a strong, compelling next step, and you can still put food on the table and keep your lifestyle up, etc., then I think take it. And if there's something you can do alongside your work, then even better, because you can develop some skills before you need to jump off. But I just think if there's something tugging at you, pulling at your heart, I think you've got to explore it, really. Don't just stay and suffer in a role it's not really the be all and end all for you. So that's what I would say. Just listen to your intuition.
Yeah, I like that. So it's all the 4 C's to yourself. Be curious, be courageous. I like this point about if you're tugged, be aware of it, listen to it, and then act on it. It's a go for it call, isn't it? I love that. Shola, thank you so much for your insight, for your storytelling, and for your modeling actually about what's possible for anyone who's listening or watching this podcast. A huge thank you to you.
Thank you, Mark. I've really enjoyed this. So thank you for this time.
Great stuff.